Warning, some may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey, welcome to this episode of The Soul Trap. If you haven't already, we want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and to share the show. We want to reach as many people as we possibly can. You can also find us on Facebook. You can find us on a lot of different platforms, Rumble. Always, you can go to thesoultrap.com, but make sure to like and share and subscribe. We got a lot of new material coming out, some interviews coming out, and some long-form content and some short-form content. We appreciate your support, and it helps us out a great deal. We're glad to have you tune in whenever you're listening to this broadcast. As we so often say and mean every time, we trust that this broadcast finds you in good health, good spirits, and most importantly, on that good and narrow way. And if you're not certain that you're on that narrow way, you reach out to us, and we will certainly help you find your way. I want to begin this episode with, without being dramatic, but being as serious as I possibly can, by putting a warning and a disclaimer on the subject that we are going to be talking about. I want to encourage you that if you have young children, they probably should not be listening to this discussion that you and I have. This is a serious discussion, and whether or not you believe the story that we're about to tell you, or the illustrations and stories that I share with you along the way of my own personal experience and others, whether or not you believe in the stories that are shared on this show, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever, because the facts behind the stories are true. In other words, what I'm saying is that the subject we're talking about today may be the most dangerous subject that we have ever discussed on this broadcast, or that you will ever discuss. We're talking about the reality of demonic activity and demonic possession, which I think we are seeing more and more at breakneck speed in these last days.
El Paso police have arrested a man who broke into a home saying he was possessed by the devil. Mom, accused of drowning her 2-year-old son a year ago, told police she did it because her son was possessed by demons. The arraignment for a West Hills mother accused of killing her 3 youngest children has been pushed to August 10th. Police say Angela Flores confessed to murdering her 12-year-old daughter Natalie, 10-year-old son Kevin, and 8-year-old son Nathan last weekend. This morning, eyewitnesses learned that Flores believed her children were possessed by demons. Authorities say her 16-year-old son helped commit the crime.
Court papers say Geronimo admitted various times to thinking Gertrudis Altward was possessed by the devil, so he beat her over the head with antique bottles to cast out the evil.
An affidavit also details chilling Facebook messages Anderson posted, referring to her son as a demonic child and talking about an exorcism. An autopsy found Jordan died from electrolyte imbalance as a result of a stomach bug.
We're here, just you and I in the studio. Recently we've had some guests in the studio. We're looking forward to having more with us. But for this particular topic, it's just you and me talking about a subject that I think sometimes is fascinating, sometimes is scary, but we don't give enough credit to moment by moment. If you had a Bible in front of you and were looking at the book of Ephesians, chapter number 6, there is a verse, verse 12, that says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." The next verse says, "Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand." Whether you're a Christian or not, the reality of the world is that there is a spiritual world. In the beginning, God, who is spirit, the Bible said, created the heaven and the earth. And what you have right there is a minimum of a 2-dimension reality, or maybe a better way of saying that is a 2-part reality. You have the earth and all that is physical in this time-space continuum reality, but you also have the heaven. In fact, the heaven first, then the earth. And the heaven represents the spiritual world, the other side, the dimension. Now, recently we've done shows talking about quantum physics. And in the next show coming up very soon, we're going to be talking about CERN and the discoveries that are being made on the other side. The truth is, though, that science is beginning to catch up. Real science, not your community college level science, but real, honest scientific discovery is starting to catch up to the fact that there is something on the other side. There is something beyond the veil. Well, they're only catching up to what the Apostle Paul wrote around AD 64 in the Scriptures. And in fact, the most paranormal book in all the world is the Bible. It begins in the spirit world, speaking into our world, physical reality, and it ends with the physical world co-joining and rejoining with the spiritual reality. Now, I've said all that to say that the fact of the matter is there is a spirit world, and that spirit world is made up of good and bad, right and wrong, sacred and evil. Along the lines, there are different books and been different authors and different researchers that have stumbled, so to say, into that reality. One of them is a book that we've mentioned here and might have even done a podcast on called The Demonologist. It's the story on the career of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are noted for the movie The Conjuring and other movies. I think they did one on a little doll. I can't remember the name of the doll. Don't want to know the name of the doll. But they were demonologists, a fascinating read if you've never read it. Again, whether or not you believe their story or not, what they're saying might be up for question at times, but what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, well, that is real. Not only that, but there is a great book called The DMT, The Spirit Molecule. Dr. Rick Strassman, who we have referenced many times on the Soul Trap, this book, along with a compendium book called the DMT Dialogues, if you really want to know what's on the other side, these are the two books right here, and I get this question all the time. These are the two books that I recommend the highest right here. If you really want to know from a scientific, pure, academic, research-based reality what's on the other side, these two books right here, if the ramifications, the consequences of what they're saying are truly processed along with the Bible, they are stunning in their reality and in their conclusions. Of course, there's another book that we also highly recommend, and I believe there's actually a preacher in Alabama, one of our listeners and followers by the name of Corey Dennis, who's preaching on this on Wednesday night. And if you're not in church, because you should be in church, because online church is not church.
It's true.
But after Wednesday night, you ought to go pick up his videos and watch them. I believe he's preaching through Jeff Mardis's book, The Prince of the Power of the Air. I think we did something about a theory he had on Noah's Ark, and there's some other material we're going to circle back around and deal with in this book at future episodes. There are many other books in my library that I have read, and all of them in one way or another are touching on the paranormal. They're touching on the reality of a spirit world that is not just out there, but a spirit world that is here, even in this very studio, I believe, and in your very home, in your car, in your work, where you are located right now. Now, the fact is, all the books in the world pale in the reality of what I believe is the final truth in Scripture, and that is that there is a spirit world around us. That spirit world being made up of good and bad, what we often call demons, are the evil side. Now, we throw words around. As a Bible believer, I think it's important that you and I are precise in what we say. We use the word demon, but the truth of the matter is that word demon does not show up in your King James Bible, and for good reason. But it does speak of evil spirits, powers, entities, forces. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I believe we're seeing more and more. In fact, I think we're going to see a bigger and a broader uptick of the powers of darkness and their influence. Now, another thing that's very interesting about the study of this subject is that the terminology possession actually in the Bible is a very rare phenomenon. I could be wrong, but it is so rare that I believe you could only really find clear-cut cases of possession in a small window. That window happens to be about a 3.5-year span when Jesus Christ was here on this earth. Now, that's not to say that the powers of darkness do not work in beings, but what I'm saying is we have to be careful when we talk about possession. I think maybe a better word than possession may be empowerment. Just as the Holy Spirit of God is able to empower a being that is saved, so the powers of darkness appear to be able to empower, to a lesser or bigger degree, people that are lost. In fact, in that same book of the Bible that I was just mentioning, in Ephesians chapter number 2, the Bible says, wherein in times past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. There is a spirit, a satanic spirit, that is at work in every single lost person. Some to a higher degree, some to a lesser degree. And there are different situations and different contextual paradigms that may increase or decrease that reality in the lost person, just as that may happen in a Christian life. But occasionally in the Bible, and I believe occasionally in life, you do come across that case of possession. You do come across a case where the powers of darkness are so thick, so vivid, so powerful, that it's stunning and hard to get away from. Such might just be the case of Anneliese Michel, or as Hollywood has dubbed her, Emily Rose. The story of Anneliese Michel is one that you may choose not to believe, but I'm going to tell you my personal opinion. If I had to guess, of all the numerous books that I've read and all of the stories that I have come across in literary form, if I had to take a wild stab in the dark, I would say that this probably comes closest to a true, real, documented case of possession. There is an article called Anneliese Michel and the Shocking Story Behind the Movie Emily Rose, written by Gabe Paoletti. Anneliese Michel was subjected to 67 Catholic exorcism rites that ultimately left her dead at the age of 23 in 1976. Though many may not know it, the horrifying events of the 2005 film The Exorcism of Emily Rose were not entirely fictional, but were rather based on the actual experience of a young German woman named Anneliese Michel. Anneliese Michel grew up devoutly Catholic. Strike one. I think probably of all the religions, and this may be a very aggressive statement that I'm going to make, but of all the religions, faults that are out there, probably Catholicism bears the most opportunity for someone to come into contact with the powers of darkness. Anneliese Michel grew up devoutly Catholic in Germany in the 1960s, where she attended Mass twice a week. When Michel was 16, she suddenly blacked out at school and began walking around in a daze. Though Michel herself had no memory of the event, her friends and family said she was in a trance-like state. A year later, Anneliese Michel experienced a similar occurrence where she woke up in a trance and wet her bed. Her body then went through a series of convulsions, causing her body to shake uncontrollably, leaving many of those closest to her certain that she was indeed possessed with a demon due to the extravagance and extreme changes in her behavior. But what happened next was even more disturbing, and the exorcisms that her family used to treat her symptoms eventually left her dead. After the second time Anneliese went into a trance, she was went to visit a neurologist who diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, a disorder that causes seizures, loss of memory, and experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations. Now, I think it's important that we pause here just a minute. Not every single illness of the mental sort is demonic activity. Absolutely not. But I think it's important to understand that not every mental disorder is not somehow related to the powers of darkness. Remember, the body, soul, and spirit are connected, and sometimes it may be possible that science is trying to come up with a way to define something that somebody is experiencing, which is actually not a scientific definition, but a spiritual one. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. After her diagnosis, Anneliese Michel began taking medication. Strike two. Again, I think one of the things that is often lost on us is that we don't really fully realize what is happening when we take these psychiatric medications. In fact, I mentioned just a few moments ago the book by Dr. Straussman called the DMT, the spirit molecule. They actually used certain kinds of medications to open up the doorway. I think some of these serial killers that we see going up shooting schools, I think some of the satanic activity that we use can be directly related to the pharmaceutical world that has basically opened up a window into the spiritual world that we don't know how to control, close, or reopen. She began taking medicine. However, the drugs she was given, the article stated, failed to help her. And as the years progressed, her condition began to deteriorate. Though she was still taking her medication, Michel began to believe that she was possessed by a demon and that she needed to find a solution outside of medicine. Now, this is an interesting part of the article because this goes back to something that I have experienced in ministry. She began to see the face of the devil wherever she went. Remember that. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. And she began to say that she heard demons whispering in her ears. Now, I'm going to digress for just a minute. But several years ago, in one of our meetings, there was a lady that was coming. I won't call her name, and the parties that are involved have long since been away from the church, never were part of the church and the work that we did here. But she was at one time involved with witchcraft. After a service one night, my wife and I spoke to her and tried to speak to her about the gospel, tried to speak to her about the Lord. I can remember she was sitting in the pew, and as we began to talk about Christ and invoked His name, began to talk about the blood of Jesus and the cross of Calvary, she leaned over and began to brush her ear like that. I asked her, I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Somebody's speaking to me." I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, they're here and they're speaking to me and they don't like what you're talking about." I said, "What are they telling you to do?" And I'll never forget, she looked up at me and said, "They're telling me to kill you." Anneliese Michel was experiencing whispers in her ears. When she heard the demons telling her that she was damned and would rot in hell, while she was praying, she concluded that the devil must be possessing her. Michel and her family sought out priests to help her with demonic possession. But all the clergy she approached rejected her requests, saying that she should seek medical help and that they needed the permission of a bishop anyway. At this point, Michel's delusions had become extreme, so the article states. Believing she was possessed, she ripped the clothes off her body. You might want to read the book of Acts. Compulsively performed up to 400 squats a day. Crawled under a table and barked like a dog for 2 days. She also ate spiders and coal, bit the heads off of a dead bird, and began to lick and drink her own urine. Now, crazy? Maybe. Putting on a show? I don't think so. What was happening to this young lady? What was happening? Finally, the article states, her mother and she found a priest. His name was Ernest Alt, who believed in her possession. He stated that she didn't look like an epileptic. She looked like somebody controlled by Satan. Anneliese Michel wrote to him saying, "I am nothing. Everything about me is vanity. What should I do? I have to improve. Pray for me." Alt petitioned the local bishop, Bishop Joseph Stengel, who eventually approved the request and granted a local priest, Arnold Rentz, permission to perform an exorcism, but ordered that it be carried out in total secret. Anneliese Michel's 67 exorcisms begin. Exorcisms, the article states, has existed in various cultures and religions for millennia, but the practice became popular in the Catholic Church in the 1500s with priests who would use the Latin phrase "Vade retro Satana," go back Satan, to expel demons from their mortal hosts. The practice of Catholic exorcism was codified in the Ritual Romanum, a book of Christian practices assembled in the 16th century. However, by the 1960s, exorcism were very rare among Catholics. But there was a rise in movies such as The Exorcist, and with renewed interest in the practice and the possibility, so came the renewed interest in exorcisms. Over the next 10 months, dealing with Anneliese Michel, following the bishop's approval, exorcisms began. Through these sessions, Michel revealed that she believed she was possessed by 6 demons. Now, that is another thing that's very interesting as well, too. It's interesting because the real cases that I have come across by study, very often there seems to be more than one demon either present or coming and going.
What are your pronouns?
Either she, her, or they, them.
Michel revealed that these demons went by the name of Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, Nero, and Fleischmann, who was a disgraced priest. Now, I don't believe that there were spirits of these men, but it is interesting that Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, and Nero are all types of the Antichrist. It's very fascinating. All these spirits would jostle for power in Anneliese Michel's body and would communicate from her mouth with a low growl. The demons would actually argue with each other, calling people stupid pigs, and would fight back and forth. The fact of the matter is, when you listen to it, the audio is stunning. We're going to play for you some clips of Anneliese Michel and the priest and her professed demonic voice. I urge you to be very careful about what you're to hear, and if there are children, not to allow them to hear it. You might not believe in it, but there may be beings around you that do believe in it. Listen and tell me what you think of the voices you're about to hear.
Der Rosenkranzmonat, weißt du ja, ne?
Ja,
Rosenkranz.
aber die wenigste beten.
Die wenigste.
Ja. Und in der Kirche wird am allerwenigsten gebeten, weil die Herrn Pfarrer ja das für unmodern halten.
Ja.
Ja.
Alle?
Fast. Die sind ja so blöd, wenn sie eine Ahnung nicht haben. Ah!
Warum fühlst du die Rosenkranz?
Warum?
Ja, warum?
Ah! Weil eine... Nein, ich sag's nicht.
Secret diese Bibel.
Weil eine starke... Halsmaul. Ja.
Eine starke Waffe. Gegen
Ja.
Satan
Ja.
und alle Dämonen.
Ja, gegen uns. Ja,
Der Rosenkranz ist eine gewaltige Macht gegen
ja.
Satan und alle Dämonen.
Aber das glaubt nicht viele. Die halten es ja nur volles Weiberzeug. Zum Glück.
Wer ist da schuld daran?
Ja.
Ihr.
Ja.
Was kostbar ist der Rosenkranz? Kostbar. Rosenkranzmonat.
Der Ausklinge bestellen nach nichts. Mir ist das Geld so schade für.
Der kostet ja was.
Bei dem schon. Gut Zeit oder auch Geld für.
Ach so, die Arbeit.
Ja, die Arbeit geht natürlich vor. Aber die Drecksau, die beten ja immer. Das kann ihnen noch ihr Glück sein. Aber das Ding, das gäbe Sachen, wenn die Drecksau, das haben die hineingepflanzt.
Du meinst die heilige Kommunion?
Ja, ja.
Was du das nicht haben? Oder sind die Hände
Das haben wir sehr gerne.
nicht?
Sehr sogar.
Ja.
Ja. Das müssen Sie der Drecksau aus Westbusch sagen, kapiert? Aber das ist vor allem im Auftrag von dir doch. Oh, Herr. Was frisst du sie wieder hinein? Scheißding.
Hier sind wir.
Oh, ja.
Komm her.
Ja! Einfach die Mitte. Oh, ist so geschickt.
Noch mehr.
Ah! Die müsse als Priester erkennbar sein. Und zweimal kapiert.
Noch mehr.
Ja.
Noch mehr.
Heiraten dürfen sie auch nicht. Auftrag von der. Ja!
Noch mehr sein.
Und in die kirchlichen Dienst dürfen sie auch nicht mehr eintreten, wenn sie das gemacht haben.
Warum nicht?
Darum. Und es muss gebeten werden. Warum?
Wo?
In den Kirchen. Und in den Familien. Vor allem den Scheiß. Ja! Sonst da schon nichts mehr, oder dass der Gift vergiss du der Sache bitte. Nein! Ich bin Nero. Ich bin der Dritte im Bunde.
Noch mehr.
Sie müssen mit in eine Scheißkassette. Und zwar mit allen zu dem Scheiß gelogen Witzbusch gehen.
Und dann?
Und dann? Dann muss er den Gott bekannt geben. Wie? Was soll er schneiden?
Jetzt ein Wort. Priesterkonferenz. Sozusagen Flüsterrede.
So, dass an die meisten Leute rankommt. Kapiert?
Noch mehr.
Als Maul.
Noch mehr.
Wie soll er am Maul halten?
Noch mehr sagen.
Die Schwestern müssen in ihre Ordenskleidung gehen.
Noch mehr.
Nein.
Noch mehr. Noch mehr.
Das der Papst muss gehorsam geleistet sein.
Alles.
Der Gehirnanfahrer, die müssen wieder auf der Kanzel predigen, dass es mich gibt. Und das Volk nicht entführen.
Das ist die Scheiße.
Ja! Das muss im Volk bewusst gemacht werden. Oh, die Sonne.
Des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen.
Die holländischen Bischöfe sind Ketzer. Heretiker. So. Eine Schlangzähne bald.
Nein.
Sieht das aus wie das.
Alles sagen. Im Namen Jesu und im Namen Maria
Wir sind Papst untreu, die keine Dauer.
befehle ich dir, unreiner Geist, alles zu sagen und zu sagen, im Namen Jesu und im Namen Maria. Im Namen der
Alle wieder.
Dreifaltigkeit, im Namen des Vaters, des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. Du musst alles sagen, was du mir zu sagen hast, im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. Die Mutter Gottes wird dich dazu zwingen. Im Namen Jesu und im Namen Maria, im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. Im Namen
Das die Abtreibung.
des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. Sage alles. Alles. Im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen.
Und zwar egal, ab welchem Monat abgetrieben wird.
Das wissen wir alle. Da ist noch nicht alles gesagt. Du musst jetzt alles sagen.
Und zwar, dass die Dinge, die Embryos, nicht zur Anschauung Gottes gelangen. So.
Sage die Wahrheit.
Ja! Weil sie nicht getauft sind.
Wo kommen die Embryos hin, die getauft sind? Nicht in die Hölle.
Nein.
Wohin?
Ja, die kommen auf.
Ja, wohin?
Dann auf.
Wohin denn?
Ja, der Scheiß, was kann ich nicht sagen.
In den Himmel.
Ja.
Also doch.
Ja, aber nicht sagen.
Vater der Lüge, sage die Wahrheit. Im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des Heiligen Geistes. Amen. Nicht zur Anschauung Gottes heißt.
Ja.
Sind aber glücklich.
Glaubt doch niemand.
Können den nicht sehen.
Alter Maul.
So you tell me, is that just a little girl seeking attention, manifesting these voices? Or is there something more? Throughout these sessions, Anneliese Michel, the article states, would frequently talk about dying to atone for the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church. She broke the bones. Now listen to this. She broke the bones and ripped the tendons in her knees from continually contorting and kneeling in prayer. Does that sound like someone just trying to get attention? Over the next 10 months, Michel was frequently restrained so that the priest could conduct exorcism rites. She slowly stopped eating and eventually was reported to have died from malnutrition and dehydration July 1st, 1976. After her death, Anneliese Michel's story became a national sensation in Germany, after her parents and the two priests who conducted the exorcism were charged with negligent homicide. They came before the court and even used a recording of the exorcism to try to justify their actions. The two priests, however, were found guilty of manslaughter resulting from negligence and were sentenced to 6 months in jail, which was later suspended, and 3 years of probation. The parents were exempted from any punishment as they had, quote-unquote, suffered enough, a criteria for sentencing in German law. So what are we to make of this story? Was this a rare but real situation of possession? And what does possession look like now? Of course, Hollywood gets a hold of the story of Anneliese Michel, turns it into Emily Rose, and scares everybody half to death. But what does real demonic possession look like? What do the powers of darkness look like in the day in which we live? Well, it's interesting. One of the things about Anneliese Michel is that she was actually purported to have been diagnosed with what is called Geschwind syndrome, a disorder that is called hyper-religiosity. Geschwind syndrome is a group of behavioral phenomenon psychologists believe is evident in some people with temporal lobe epilepsy. There is controversy surrounding whether it's a true neuropsychiatric disorder. Now let me just pause and say something again here. I believe in the day in which we live that psychiatry and psychology are trying to come up with medical sounding, scientific sounding definitions and causes for the effects that are actually behavioral, heart, and spiritual. For instance, there has been this massive uptick in young children being diagnosed with autism and with all different kinds of disorders. Is there an autistic problem? Possibly. Are there disorders? Possibly. But a lot of it is behavioral. I hate to break this to you, but a lot of this stuff, not all, but a lot of it could be dealt with a belt rather than a medication being given to them. But psychiatrists and psychologists are constantly coming up with these definitions, trying to give a medical reason for a spiritual, emotional, behavioral cause. Now that is what happened here. They came up with a thing called Geschwin syndrome, and there's a lot of controversy. They believe that people that have temporal lobe epilepsy can be involved in chronic and even mild changes in personality which intensify over time. Geschwin syndrome includes 5 primary changes in the person and an intensified mental life. The first is called hypergraphia. Hypergraphia is the tendency for extensive and compulsive writing and drawing and fidgeting, and has been experienced by those who have had multiple seizures. Then there's hyperreligiosity. Some individuals may experience hyperreligiosity characterized by increased, intense religious feelings and philosophical quote-unquote interests. Many religious leaders may even exhibit this form of epilepsy. Then there is atypical sexuality. People with this supposed Geschwin syndrome reported higher rates of atypical or altered sexuality. In other words, rather than being the typical heterosexual, there is homosexuality, transsexuality, hypersexuality, but something is distorted and perverted in that. Then there is circumstantiality. There is a tendency for them to talk on and on and on, the incapability to be alone with their own thoughts. And then there is what is called an intense mental life. Individuals demonstrate intense mental life, including deep emotional responses. In other words, they're not able to think through or reason through. They respond to everything emotionally overboard. Now, the fact of the matter is, everything that I just described to you right there can be found a dime a dozen in a high school or a college campus. Which begs the question, what exactly does being controlled, influenced, empowered, imbibed by evil spirits actually look like? Today, across the United States of America on college campuses, we are seeing George Soros funded, operated, and supplied, they all got the same tents, protests for Palestinians. Of course, all of these people that would be protesting, if you were to pick them up and drop them in Gaza, would be killed instantly for what they are and what they believe. But they're all protesting, violently so. Is it possible that there's a higher influx of the powers of darkness on these college campuses than we realize? What is the line between neuroscience and demonic influence? Well, there is a very interesting thing that has come about recently. Again, the scientific world, trying to give a scientific answer to a spiritual cause, may have done so again. There is an extremely rare neurological condition that makes, they believe, faces appear distorted like a demon. That's right. There is a new study out that says there may be a neurological issue with some people that allows them or makes them to see people's faces like a demon. In an article by Sarah Kuta, for the first time, scientists have recreated what one patient suffering from, and I'm going to pronounce this very slowly, prosopometamorphosia. That's a lot, but they call it PMO for short. Now scientists believe that PMO is actually what makes people assume or believe that they're seeing a demonic-like face in other people. The article states, one winter morning, roughly 3 years ago, Victor Shara woke up and spotted his roommate walking to the bathroom. However, when Shara looked at his roommate's face, he was startled to see that the man's facial features had stretched to look like something out of a Star Trek movie, quote unquote, like a demon face. He tells London Times. The corners of his mouth and eyes were pulled back. His ears were pointy, and he had deep grooves in his forehead. Now, nothing had actually changed about his roommate's face to you and me. But something had shifted drastically in the way Shara perceived it. He was understandably terrified. The same thing happened when he looked at other people's faces too. Not everyone's, mind you, just some. I tried to explain to my roommate what I was seeing, and he thought I was nuts, Shara tells CNN. Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly many people in the world look like a creature in a horror movie. Shara, who is now 59 and lives in Clarksville, Tennessee, was later diagnosed with PMO, an extremely rare neurological disorder. I would say so. An extremely rare neurological disorder that causes human faces to appear distorted. Does it? Or does it cause him to see non-human faces in their reality? Fewer than 100 cases have been reported since 1904, and many doctors have never heard of it. But Shara's case may now help raise awareness about the mysterious condition and offer new insight into what life is like for people suffering from PMO. The fact is, PMO cases are on a huge uptick. Interesting. The Bible says in the book of Psalms that towards the end of God's judgment on the children of Israel, He sent evil angels among them. There is a great book out called They Walk Among Us. You have to ask yourself, what are these people seeing? Is it a neurological disorder? Or is that science trying to clothe an effect which is really a spiritual cause? Shara's case, the article says, may help raise awareness. For the first time, researchers were able to produce a digital representation of what faces that have been warped by PMO look like. I'll let you be a judge. You tell me what these faces look like.
No, sir, I don't like it.
Faces only look distorted to Shara when he sees people in person. Now that's fascinating too. When he looks at faces in photographs or on a computer screen, they appear completely normal. The distinction allowed researchers to use photo editing software to recreate what Shara was seeing. Now that's very fascinating. Why only in person? What is it about looking at the person that you only see a distortion? But then if you show me a picture of a person, I see what's there. Why would the mind have a hard time with that? Well, one part is because the mind is actually seeing what may be there. But I digress. PMO symptoms, the article goes on to state, differ greatly from person to person. Again, that's a fascinating thing. Whereas when you get the flu, the symptoms are pretty much the same. Sinus infection, pretty much the same. Cancer, pretty much the same. Have you ever noticed, though, with all these neurological quote-unquote disorders, that they vary from person to person? It's a moving target. This article states, faces may appear droopy, discolored, or oddly textured, and specific features may seem to have moved to different parts of the face. When looking into the mirror, a patient's own visage might seem disformed. So while the digitally edited images represent what Shara sees when he looks at human faces, they may not match what other people with PMO experience. Many people are afraid to mention their symptoms because they fear others will think the distortions are signs of a psychiatric disorder. It's a problem. Brad Duquesne states, a psychologist and brain scientist states, it's a problem that people often don't understand. More people probably have it than we realize, but they're too afraid to say anything about it. For many people, PMO symptoms disappear within a few days or weeks, but for some, like Shara, they can persist for years. It's not clear what causes PMO, though researchers suspect it results from issues in parts of the brain that handle facial processing. Some patients have developed PMO after suffering a stroke, infection, tumor, or some sort of head trauma, while some others seem to develop conditions spontaneously without any obvious explanation. So the answer is we don't know why. Nobody can say why. When Shara wakes up, he looks into a mirror and one person looks like a demon and another person doesn't. Is that his brain, the meat, the tissue, the blood, the fibers, or is that his mind? Is he seeing something that is there, or is he seeing something that is not there? Is he processing a deeper level of reality, or does he just need medication? Patients correctly diagnosed with PMO, the article states, are in dire need of speaking to others with this condition in order to share experiences and to feel less isolated and alien. Jan Dirk Blom, a clinical psychopathologist at the University of Netherlands, stated, "Those who study this have found that it is very, very fascinating, hard to put their finger on, and yet it is a phenomenon that is growing globally at a very rapid pace." Interestingly enough, there was a movie by a great actor by the name of Rowdy Roddy Piper, who, when he put his glasses on, saw the world as it truly was. Interesting, there was also not long ago a lady, and let's not forget, a lady on a plane.
But I am telling you right now, that motherfucker back there is not real. And you can sit on this plane and you can die with them or not.
A lady on the plane who was so willing to leave everything that she had. She didn't want her carry-on. She didn't care that she was getting kicked off. Didn't care that she was getting arrested. Didn't care what the world thinks. She was sitting beside somebody who she was convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt was not human. Did she have this PMO? What about the lead singer for Smashing Pumpkins, who on a nationally syndicated show discussed the fact that he saw something change from human to non-human? Does he have PMO? Or is this the latest way to try to explain away the fact that people are seeing what has already always been there, only the veil is getting thinner? What did Anneliese Michel go through? What did she experience? Demonic possession? You'll have to be the judge of that. What are people seeing? Demons walking among us? I don't know. You'll have to be the judge of that. But I will tell you this. The veil is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And I personally believe that the closer that we get to the return of the Lord Jesus Christ, the more we are going to see the incursion of the powers that be. As in the days of Noah, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. And in the days of Noah, the sons of God were among the sons of men and the daughters of men. As in the days of Lot, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. And the angels were involved as well too. What I'm telling you is that the world may not be as it appears. There is a deeper level. There is another tier. There is a greater and more profound reality. And we would do well to remember that most ancient verse. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality. The principalities have always been with us. It is only now that we are beginning to see that they are with us.
Aber den Schuss.